Hi everyone, Jason Levine with Harry Levine Insurance, here to talk about liquor liability. After all, who doesn't enjoy a good cocktail or a cold beer? In fact, I'm pretty partial to a good smoked old-fashioned myself. Designing the right liquor liability insurance program for you is a pretty simple task if you work with a well-trained independent insurance agent. Liquor liability goes beyond the incidental coverage that may or may not be present on your general liability insurance. What it simply does is protect you for legal defense and indemnity, that means a payout to a third party, in the event that you are liable for injuries or property damage that arises from your serving or furnishing of alcohol. One of the most common examples is that a patron in a restaurant or a bar is overserved and then drives their vehicle and causes a horrific accident or even a small property damage incident. And by small, I mean, maybe drives their vehicle into a building but doesn't hurt anybody. What that coverage would do at that point is to protect your bar, restaurant, or establishment otherwise from legal claims. It would also provide legal defense. That means hire you an attorney, even if that attorney creates a result where there is no payout to the third party. Remember, when you're sued or brought into a claim, you still must defend it, no matter how ridiculous or no matter how much merit it has. A lot of businesses think, well, I only sell beer or wine. I don't need liquor liability. Liquor's bourbon, gin, rum, things like that. Incorrect. Perhaps a better name for liquor liability might be alcoholic beverage liability. The truth is, whether you sell just beer and wine like many pizza shops do, or you have a full liquor license and you can serve up a cold beer or one of my favorite smoked old fashions, this coverage is critical, and your existing insurance almost certainly does not cover losses related to the serving or selling of alcohol unless you have this specific coverage. The good news is it's typically inexpensive. Of course, it depends on what percentage of your receipts, your gross receipts, not your net profits, come from the selling or furnishing of alcohol. And of course, what is the overall volume of those receipts? Meaning, if you have a cafe that has beer and wine and you do $500,000 in gross receipts a year, your 10% liquor, meaning that would be $50,000 in alcohol receipts, that coverage is probably pretty inexpensive. Now, if you're a fine steakhouse doing $3 million in sales per year, and 40% of that is liquor because you sell nice bottles of wine and things like that, your premium is likely going to be a little bit higher. So what does it mean if your defense costs are inside or outside of your limits? Simply put, legal defense is a component of what your insurance could pay for. There are many components, but the other most commonly understood one is an indemnification, or a payout to a third party. Think like a settlement. So if your defense costs or your attorney's fees for your attorney are inside of your limits, that means they count against those limits. If you have a $1 million liquor liability limit and you spend $200,000 on attorney's fees, there are now $800,000 left for a possible payout or settlement. That is if your legal fees are inside the limits. What we consider the most desirable, but not always obtainable situation is outside the limits defense costs. What does that mean? In the same situation, your policy would actually pay $1.2 million or up to that. The $200,000 in legal fees would be outside of the limits, which means not included in the $1 million indemnification limit. So again, inside the limits, which is often a little less expensive because the limits are reduced by attorney fees, works, as I stated, where the attorney fees count against the total limit available. Outside of the limits, which is often a touch more expensive, works where the attorney fees do not count against your limits. Basically, you're paying slightly more to not sacrifice that $1 million. That $1 million, if needed, can go to a third party, and your attorney fees are still covered above that limit. Navigating liquor liability can be a little bit of a confusing process. For instance, when underwriters are looking at a food service establishment, they want to figure out, is this a restaurant or is this a bar? And at first glance, if 60% of your gross receipts are attributable to liquor, remember that does include beer and wine, to alcoholic beverage sales, there might be a rush to judgment that, well, you're a bar. Let me give you a perfect example and why you need an independent insurance agent like us here at Harry Levine Insurance to help work with underwriting on that. What if you're a fine dining restaurant? White tablecloth, very nice food, very nice bar items. So you have 60 or even 65% alcohol sales. The thing is, you're selling bottles of wine to tables that cost well over $100. So even if you're serving them $50 or $60 steaks, they're still spending more on the alcohol portion of the receipt. Helping an underwriter to understand that can help your eligibility, not necessarily your premium, but your ability to get proper restaurant liquor liability insurance and not be mistaken for a bar. On the flip side, if you're fast casual or a sports bar type place that's selling $12 or $15 burgers and a lot of $5 beers, you do truly belong in a bar program or a bar and tavern program. So it's important to make sure that that distinction is clear. And that's just one of many of the value addeds of working with an independent insurance agent. So call us here today at Harry Levine Insurance. We're even located on Restaurant Row in Southwest Orlando, and we've been working with many of the area's finest dining establishments for decades. Give us a call today to help guide you in designing your own very best insurance program that meets your perceived needs and your perceived risks.